Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sprint 211 review. This was a normal 2-week sprint ending on May 1st. Let's get started. I'll start with the overview, Melody on the UI, Adam on providers, Joe on the platform, Keenan on the API, and I'll finish it off with some developer updates. As you can see, this was a pretty typical sprint with 80 PRs merged this sprint. A huge chunk of them being enhancements. We're starting to make some movement on the workflow stuff, plus some other features were added. And I don't see Melody on, so I'll do the UI. We had 2 enhancements and 8 bug fixes this sprint, and I'll go through the screenshots. The AutoSD team added some editing on the storage service update screen. Jeffrey had some fixes for the specs after our node upgrade. I fixed an issue which across our build systems, dev systems, and CI systems, where certain versions of Node.js would or would not have a particular option that we need. Jeffrey made a fix in the charts where the tables would have undefined name for the title. David fixed an issue where the management console button would appear incorrectly or do the wrong thing. And Jeffrey made a fix for accessibility for the tabs in this particular page to allow them to be used more accessibly. And there were a few other changes. Joe has been working on Zeit work, and he changed the libgem dash name to libgem slash name, which is more favorable to Zeit work. Fixes were made for filter AE objects to allow multiple classes to pass through. And then we've had some version upgrades, upgrading Webpack on the service UI, and also, again, with the OpenSSL legacy provider option, it was no longer needed with the latest Webpack. And that's it on the UI. Over to Adam on providers.
Thanks, Jason. So this sprint in core, we fixed an issue with the Cisco Intersite provider not subclassing an existing manager VM subclass. So with part of Joe's Zeit work PRs, he found that we were inheriting from a class that didn't exist in core. So we added the physical infra manager VM subclass. This was kind of half working because it was just defaulting to the base VM subclass, but it's much better to have the explicit class if it's being inherited. So we got that fixed up. I fixed an issue where we were queuing refreshes, both primarily from the EMS refresh timer, but also directly from the UI for providers which didn't support refresh, which would subsequently fail due to missing credentials. These specifically include the embedded Ansible provider and the embedded workflows providers. So we will now check to see if the provider supports refresh before doing the scheduled queue, so you don't see those errors in the logs. So nothing was really broken, but there were just extra errors in the logs for something which was never going to work. We also removed some extra new lines from the infra manager persister builder that got introduced as part of some cleanup, just to make that clean that up a little bit. For Amazon, Joe added a missing dependency for NetSCP that we were referencing from code but didn't have in the gem spec. And as mentioned before, the Cisco Intersite provider, Joe fixed the incorrect parent class for the physical switch network port. So really seeing some good bug fixes come out of this Zeit work exercise. Next slide. For Power Virtual Servers, Jay fixed the events API call after a breaking SDK change. The format for how we're passing in the times that we want to go from and to changed in the SDK. And so we fixed that up in the provider plugin to get the events working again. And he also removed some incorrect defaults from the Power VS provision form. The YAML had some defaults that the UI wasn't honoring, and so it didn't make sense to keep them, and the user had to make a selection anyway, so we just cleaned up those from the provision YAML form. For Power VC, we fixed incorrect provision dialog loaded from the parent class. So it was actually loading the OpenStack dialog directly. While this wasn't technically an issue because they are identical, if they want to go and make some changes to the Power VC dialogs in the future, it would be missed because it was loading the OpenStack dialog. For Kubernetes, we fixed node collection for S390X architecture nodes. The interface names for the NICs were different than what we were expecting, and so no metrics were being returned for the query that we were submitting. So we fixed that up to include the ENC type interface names, and then we also fixed a bug where essentially if we weren't getting all of the counters back, we were excluding it because we didn't want to have, for example, CPU in one timestamp and then missing in the next timestamp because it would cause issues with rollups if it was missing. So we were dropping timestamps that didn't include all of the metrics that we were requesting. But in cases where a particular counter wasn't returned in any of the timestamps, which was the case here, we were dropping good CPU and memory metrics because we didn't have network, for example. And so this fixed that up because now you can, if there's a future bug with network collection, for example, we would still get a CPU and memory. So it really doesn't, it's not an all or nothing now. Next slide, and over to Joe.
Okay, for ManageIQ platform enhancements, Keenan improved some of the testing in active record virtual attributes. Brandon switched the build upload location to IBM Cloud. Adam reused the configuration scripts table for use with workflows, and he added the tracking of workflows via MIQ task reference in case it takes a long time to run the task. We can track it. I made a backwards compatible changes to a few Rails engines to be more friendly to the Rails 7 autoloader called Sitework. Next slide. For ManageIQ platform bugs, Jason made the multi-repo executable a Ruby script instead of shell, so it would play nice with the way RubyGems bin stubs load these files. Next, Keenan fixed the test failures in the appliance console due to multiple gem file source lines. Next, for the release of the i18n gem 1.13.0, a change was made that broke a gem dependency of ours in getText i18n Rails. So I first locked down the release of i18n, and then I fixed the upstream gem so we can now use the new version of i18n. Next, Brandon made some fixes in the RPM build regarding logic that appears to be no longer relevant following the NPM upgrade. Brandon also fixed an issue in pods by ensuring the HTTPD package is installed after the just installed CentOS stream release RPM. Nazar fixed a Kafka disk quota exceeded error by doubling the Kafka volume from 1 to 2 gigabytes. And finally, I fixed an issue in the appliance console's IPA code by ensuring the realms @ symbol is double escape to avoid shell interpretation. Next slide, onto the API.
Cool. So Joe did some good Ziteworks goodness and brought the API up to Zitework level so that, as you heard that word mentioned before, going across the board. And then Gur enhanced the storage service so that we could edit those resources now. On to Jason.
Okay, and on the developer side, we have a new gem called multi-repo. This was extracted from the ManageIQ release system, and it's basically a way to deal with an organization of multiple repositories and being able to do things simultaneously on all of them. For example, if you want to set all the labels on every single repo in an entire org, or you want to do something in the Git code base on every single repo, like add a new configuration file, for example. This has been an effort I've been working on for like 2 years, maybe 3 years in my spare time. So I'm finally happy to get it over the finish line. Our ManageIQ release repo now uses the multi-repo gem as well. And that's it. So that's the end of the Sprint 211 review. Our next Sprint 212 review will be on May 17th at the usual place and time. And as always, I'd like to thank the speakers today, all the contributors to Manage IQ and our entire community. Thanks, everyone.